Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
Corruption as well as violence has been delaying the reconstruction of Iraq. Participants at the fourth donor committee meeting of the International Reconstruction Fund facility for Iraq agreed that overcoming those challenges is the only means to start the rebuilding process. Iraq presented the conference with an updated version of the projects it hopes to finance in a document called the National Development Strategy, an overview of the most pressing needs. Details with Samir.
Iraq gave donors a list of its most urgent rebuilding projects, admitting that corruption as well as violence has been delaying the reconstruction of the country. Representatives from around 60 countries and international organizations gathered in the Dead Sea Resort to follow up on meetings in Madrid and Tokyo over the last 2 years, at which they pledged $14 billion. But only a small amount of the billions of dollars pledged to help rebuild Iraq have been spent because of concerns about graft and mismanagement and because of disruption from anti-US insurgents targeting efforts to revive the economy.
The Madrid conference, a lot of money and assistance was pledged to Iraq, but small amounts of these assistance have received by the Iraqi government. I think there are two main reasons for this. One is political, and the second is the security issue on the ground.
In a sign that aid might be following more easily, World Bank officials said the bank has extended a $500 million soft loan for Iraq for infrastructure projects with an interest-free grace period of over 10 years.
Well, this conference is really a serious reevaluation of how we can be more effective. What we're trying to do now is begin a process of turning over certain responsibilities that had previously been exercised by various donors to the Iraqi government. And we're going to have the World Bank report on their experiences, the UN, but also the big bilateral donors like the Japanese, the British, and the Americans. So we're trying to learn from past experience.
It is time to make a difference for the lives of the Iraqi people. It has been over 2 years since the fall of the regime, and because of a variety of factors, reconstruction has not been at the pace that is required, and I hope through better coordination and partnership with the donor community, we can really move on and make sure that the pledges have been committed to Iraq will be turned into meaningful projects on the ground and will impact the lives of the Iraqi people for the better.
In the meantime, Iraq's economy continues to suffer as water and electricity are in their worst state in decades.
Access to safe water is a big issue. With the limited resources we have to ensure access to safe food, safe drugs, and safe medicine. And we would like actually that the donors support the whole system of drugs and pharmaceuticals. Some of the achievements that I think many people do not know because we are focusing on the violence, that Iraq today is the 5th year polio-free.
One of the highlights that strengthened the Iraqis' position for receiving the appropriate funds was the Iraqis' elections.
An immense challenge it was, because it was not only organizing the polling, but basically putting together the whole legal structure for the modalities for the election to occur. It had to do with basically afterwards building from scratch an electoral authority that were really a people marching towards its sovereignty and its destiny. By the end of 2005, they will have completed 3 elections, which is a rather unique statistic in the world.
As in any other international event, lessons had to be learned, mistakes avoided, and progress encouraged.
We have learned lessons And this is the first conference where we are actually applying the lessons we have learned, and we are analyzing one by one. So this conference has a special speed, a special focus for doing something in the next 6 months, and that we didn't have in the past.
But at the end of the day, the major responsibility falls on the Iraqi people and their elected governments. Optimism is the right mood throughout the meetings, and the spirit of, if there is a will, there is always a way, comes to mind. Samir Jamil, Jordan Television.
And in the latest violence in Iraq, gunmen have shot dead 11 Iraqis, among them 5 policemen and 3 soldiers, while 4 unidentified bodies were found in Baghdad. 2 policemen were killed in the New Baghdad district southeast of the Iraqi capital. Gunmen also shot dead another policeman while leaving his home in Al-Dura district south of Baghdad. Meanwhile, an Iraqi army patrol found the body of a 60-year-old who was shot dead by a single shot to the head, dumped in Al-Dura. Iraqi police also found another 3 unidentified bodies north of Baghdad. Unknown assailants opened fire, killing a police colonel while driving in Al-Rifai district in the western part of Mosul. Another high-ranking official in the police was killed in Samarra. Gunmen also kidnapped a 49-year-old Iraqi businessman in Balad. In various other parts of Iraq, 6 people, amongst them 3 armed men, a truck driver and 2 civilians were killed, while 5 others were injured. An Interior Ministry source said 3 members of the Iraqi army were killed, while 2 were injured when armed assailants attacked their patrol in Amariya district, west of Baghdad. Also, a U.S. Marine was killed in Ramadi, west of Baghdad. Moving to the Palestinian lands, Israeli soldiers shot dead a Palestinian near a roadblock in the southern Gaza Strip. 15-year-old Raghib al-Masri was with his family when he was shot. Israel had shut the checkpoint on Friday following a surge of Israeli-Palestinian violence that threatened to unravel an already shaky 5-month-old ceasefire. In Ramallah, Israeli soldiers have arrested 7 jihad activists when they stormed the West Bank city. Meanwhile, Israeli security forces blocked thousands of riotous protesters from heading towards Gaza's Jewish settlements for a march aimed at impeding Israel's withdrawal from the occupied territory next month. 20,000 police and soldiers were deployed to prevent hundreds of buses carrying opponents of Prime Minister Ariel Sharon's pull-out plan from reaching staging areas in southern Israel. An Egyptian delegation met in Gaza with Palestinian factions ahead of a meeting tomorrow, which is expected to have all factions party to the Cairo Agreement attend. Separate groups met with the Egyptian delegation that is there to mediate between the various factions part of the Cairo Agreement. The Cairo Agreement had brought a relative calm between the Palestinians and Israelis in recent months. Tomorrow's meeting is being held in a bid to help restore a de facto ceasefire with Israel. Earlier, the Palestinian Prime Minister stated during a news conference that the rule of law needs to be implemented and that Israeli provocation should not be rewarded by acts which benefit nobody.
Hello and welcome. Parliamentarians voted for the release of Lebanese forces leader Samir JaJa. Less than an hour ago, it was signed the amnesty law for his release. Hezbollah MPs walked out of the ongoing parliament session, which also signed the decree regarding detainees involved in the Majd al-Anjar and Diniya matter. Now that JaJa's amnesty law was passed, President Lahood and outgoing Premier Najib Mikati are expected to sign it tomorrow. The last step would be the official publishing of the legislation. Last night, Mrs. JaJa met with PSP leader MP Walid Jumblat. In a statement, she called on all Lebanese forces supporters to respect public orders. MP George Adwan told LBC JaJa was very calm towards this amnesty, even though his release was a matter of a few days. Adwan said even though JaJa was in good health, once he was released, the LF leader should undergo exams. JaJa is the only warlord to have been tried and put in jail on charges of crimes committed during the civil war. He was sentenced to life imprisonment 11 years ago. JaJa Khouri, an LF member and JaJa's right-hand man, who surrendered himself in 1994, as well as others who were sentenced to jail alongside JaJa, are also to be affected by the amnesty law. President Lahood met this morning with outgoing Premier at the Babda Palace. Najib Miati informed him that the crisis on the Lebanese-Syrian border was highlighted at the cabinet session yesterday. He said it was a committee was created to deal with the border tension and to find a solution for the Lebanese exporters. Miati said the team would meet today with the concerned parties to examine means of cooperation and examine temporary means of exportation. Responding to a question, Miati said the current government was in charge of the matter, but stressed he did not have the necessary pressure to have confidence of the actual parliament. The tensions on the border escalated as Syrian authorities arrested 9 Lebanese fishermen since Wednesday, who Lebanese authorities sources said trespassed into Syrian territorial waters. Hundreds of trucks are still paralyzed at the Lebanese-Syrian frontier, with tons of perishable goods on board going to waste. Regarding the latest border crisis, U.S. sources quoted by Nahar Daily accused Syria of imposing an economic blockade on Lebanon. Edith Karam has the story.
Syrian authorities have arrested 9 Lebanese fishermen after they strayed into their neighbors' territorial waters, raising tensions between the countries. A Lebanese security source told AFP yesterday patrols from the Syrian port at Tartus arrested 5 Lebanese fishermen who were in Syrian territorial waters. 4 other fishermen were arrested for the same reason on Wednesday. The Northern Lebanese Fishermen's Union slammed what it called the first such incidents and called for a symbolic strike today in protest against this new unfraternal measure. The union insisted that Lebanese fishermen have been going worry-free into Syrian territorial waters for years, and a large number of Syrian fishermen operate in northern Lebanese ports under a 1991 Fraternity, Coordination and Cooperation Treaty signed between both countries. Syrian Transport Minister Makram Abeid was quoted as saying by the Al-Bas newspaper, "This is a judicial measure." He said the fishing boats that were seized did not have the required authorization and stressed that it is a contravention, adding that the matter was being dealt with by the courts. Meanwhile, hundreds of trucks remained stuck at the main Syrian-Lebanese border after Damascus reinforced security controls and said it was modernizing the border crossings. Some Lebanese believe the arrests and holdups are a reaction to the departure of Syrian troops from its neighbor in April, following international pressure for them to leave after a 30-year presence. Nasser Khouri, General Secretary of the Supreme Lebanese Syrian Council, said the Lebanese state must take some kind of initiative to create an atmosphere of trust. Continuing anti-Syrian media campaigns have offered Syrian public opinion, which exerts pressure on the Syrian state.
Speaking of the border crisis, Druze leader MP Walid Jumblat said it was the responsibilities of President Lahoud and outgoing Premier Najib Miati to solve this Syrian economic blockade on Lebanon. Speaking to reporters following a meeting with his parliamentary bloc, the head of the Progressive Socialist Party expressed his anger regarding this crisis, which Jumblat said was threatening the Lebanese people. He slammed Lahoud and Miati for what he called their indifference towards the issue. Jumblat called on both leaders to establish the necessary contacts with Syrian authorities to overcome the problem. European Union foreign ministers are to meet today in Brussels with developments in the Middle East and Iran's nuclear talks figuring high on their agenda. The ministers Discussions will include talks about the Lebanese-Syrian border issue, as the ministers are also expected to renew calls for Syria to respect and implement UN resolutions and call on Syria to take action to promote stability in the region, notably in neighboring Lebanon and Iraq. Also high on the agenda of talks related to the Middle East, the ministers will discuss Israel's high-stakes withdrawal from the Gaza Strip, the state of negotiations on Iran's nuclear activities, Turkey's candidature for EU enlargement, and express concern about developments in Uzbekistan and Zimbabwe. Arab League Secretary General Amir Moussa called for political intent between Damascus and Beirut in the wake of the Syrian army's April withdrawal from its smaller neighbor and ongoing tensions between the two. Moussa said the departure of Syrian forces from Lebanon does not signal the end of Syrian-Lebanese relations. He stressed a political intent is necessary between the two countries, which must take into account the importance of the common interests that tie them. Moussa's call for understanding came after he met with Syrian President Bashar al-Assad and Foreign Minister Farouk al-Shara. Tensions between Syria and Lebanon have been rising in recent months following a series of political assassinations of anti-Syrian figures in Lebanon, which many have blamed on Damascus. Syria has denied any involvement. Moussa, who arrived in Damascus following a visit to Saudi Arabia, said the two countries must foster solid and constructive relations on all levels, adding Syrian-Lebanese relations must evolve positively. Moussa hinted he would want to visit Lebanon after the formation of a government. The Arab League chief said he discussed with Assad U.S. pressure on Syria regarding infiltration of militants from its border into Iraq. Prime Minister Designate Fouad Signora said issues blocking the formation of a new government should be resolved at the latest this week. Signora warned that the issue in Lebanon would not continue this way in reference to the political vacuum that has left the country with no functioning government since last month's legislative elections. Signora said he was known to be patient, but that patience has its limits, in a direct ultimatum to the president, Samir Lahood, who has been rejecting proposed cabinet members. Signora met with the head of various religious groups over the weekend in his latest attempt to gain support for the cabinet he has chosen. He said the latest cabinet blueprint submitted to Lahoud was the only harmonious lineup with which he could cooperate to cope with the threat facing Lebanon. But issues regarding the government may remain unresolved, as MP Michel Aoun has spoken out against his inclusion in the proposed government, saying that it ignores 23 to 30% of Lebanese people, declaring that Lahoud is constitutionally entitled to having 1/3 plus 1.
In the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful, thanks for joining us. This is JNN English News and I'm Fariba Wahid in Tehran. Leader of the Islamic Revolution, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, is expressing delight over setting up of a popular government in Iraq and says an independent, united and well-off Iraq is Iran's #1 priority. At a meeting Monday with Iraq's visiting Prime Minister Ibrahim Jafari in Mashhad, northeastern Iran, the leader pointed to the enemies of Iraq that oppose security and progress in that country and added, despite all this, the Iraqi nation and government are determined to reconstruct their country. Ayatollah Khamenei then called on the Iraqi nation to remain vigilant against certain conspiracies that aim to divide Sunni and Shiite Muslims in Iraq. Huge steps have been taken during Iraqi Prime Minister Ibrahim Jafari's visit to Iran. Prior to his departure to the northeastern city of Mashhad early Monday, Jafari took part at a joint press conference with Iranian First Vice President Mohammad Reza Aref and hailed his meetings with Iranian officials as positive. He said the talks have amounted to formation of 5 committees to boost mutual ties in different fields, including political and economic ones, as well as anti-terrorism activities and Iraq's reconstruction. Iran and Iraq signed an agreement Monday on the dispatch of Iranian pilgrims to Iraqi holy sites on a daily basis. The MOU envisions daily transfer from 5 border points of pilgrims, a 1,500 figure, a figure which can rise to 5,000 provided that security and health conditions are improved in Iraq. President Mohammad Khatami says Tehran is keen to deepen ties with all African states, Togo in particular. While at the official talks between Iranian and Togolese high-ranking delegations in Tehran on Monday, President Khatami appreciated Togo's support for Iran's standpoints at international circles and added the African nations are set to determine their own fate. On his part, Togolese President Faure Gnassingbe said his country is interested in enhancement of ties with Tehran on political, economic, and social levels. The International Conference on the United Nations Reform wrapped up in Tehran on Monday. Foreign and domestic experts from 20 countries held 5 special roundtables on collective security, sustainable human development, challenges and horizons, UN reform, and structure of Security Council. This is what an expert told JNN reporter on the objectives of the conference.
The German government has always been convinced that it will in particular need a new setup in the Security Council, better reflecting also the countries of the developing world, including the Islamic and Arabic countries. So we do hope that the session in New York now will bring about a clearer picture of where these reforms are going to go.
And now a brief look at some other news. Iranian President-elect told the visiting Togolese President Farid Nassingbe that Tehran's attitude towards African states is based on rapport, cooperation, as well as revered human ideals such as justice and freedom-seeking. Iranian President-elect also held a meeting with Iraqi Prime Minister and emphasized that the Islamic Republic is fully ready to assist the Iraqi government in restoration of security and stability, as well as its reconstruction drive. Iran's Foreign Ministry spokesman Hamid Zazifi says Tehran will resume its uranium enrichment program if EU comprehensive proposal disregards Iran's legitimate right to possess nuclear know-how. Zazifi told reporters on Monday Iran-EU nuclear negotiations have entered a critical period with the deadline early August approaching.
Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, the leader of the Islamic Revolution in Iran, confirmed that the reasons behind the random assassinations and the killings in Iraq by extremists are to stir instability and chaos in the region. Mr. Khamenei hinted that the Zionists may have something to do with such acts of terror in Iraq. During his meeting with the Iraqi Prime Minister Dr. Ibrahim al-Ja'fari, in the town of Mashhad, Khamenei confirmed that the new Iraq is receiving a warm welcome in the Islamic region. However, the Muslim world is disgusted with the American presence there. Ayatollah Khamenei called on the Iraqis to stand united and be aware of the conspiracies around them. Some groups are trying to plant hatred between the Iraqi people in order to split the nation into Sunnis and Shiites in the Muslim world. Al-Ja'fari had also met with the newly elected Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. Al-Ja'fari concluded his visit by signing a number of trade, economic, and security agreements. He further stressed on the importance of cooperation between the two nations. The friendly meeting between the Iraqi Prime Minister Ibrahim al-Ja'fari and Iranian senior officials provided reassurance and comfort for both sides. Iranian observers described al-Ja'fari's visit as a strategic turning point in the relationship between the two countries. The outgoing Iranian President Mohammad Khatami denounced the use of terrorism in the name of Islam. Al-Ja'fari also met with Haddad Adil, the president of the Iranian parliament, who reassured his guest that the Iran foreign policy towards Iraq has not changed as the new Iranian government under Mahmoud Ahmadinejad had sworn in. Mr. Najad condemned the killings of women and children in Iraq, citing that such acts of terror enhance the needs for the continuing presence of the multinational forces in Iraq. The visit of al-Ja'fari and his cabinet to Iran included the signing of a number of agreements in the areas of oil, highways, and electricity. The two countries signed mutual security and military agreements. Tehran also pledged more than $1 trillion in a relief fund.
We did lots of talks and negotiations about providing Iraq with electricity. We also signed agreements of mutual cooperation in regard to oil. We will provide refined oil to Iraq through oil pipelines that will be constructed between Al-Basra and Abazan.
In light of bitter reactions from Washington and some regional organizations to al-Ja'fari's visit, the Iraqi delegates were cautious of not giving wrong impressions.
There are no reasons for anyone to panic as long as there is trust in the relationship between the two parties, and such relationship is very balanced and mutual.
Observers pointed out that al-Ja'fari's visit may stir some resentment and outrage from Washington and its alliance. In addition, the visit may also anger some armed extremist groups in Iraq.
It is strange for some terrorists to spill Iraqi blood in the name of expelling foreign troops out of Iraq. By resorting to terrorism, the extremists are giving reasons for the multinational forces to be there in the first place. The extremists are also trying to sit on the negotiation table by knocking on the doors of these foreign countries, which is contradictory to the extremists' beliefs.
Regardless of the conflicting comments on Al-Ja'far's visit to Iran, the visit is a step taken by both countries to transform Iraq back to its previous position and an attempt to open a new chapter in the relation between the two countries after decades of struggle. Both the Iranian capital and the Iraqi capital described the visit as a victory for both countries as they are going through a cooling-off period, and it is a step to turn the threats into opportunities. Nabil Duhrazan, العالم, Tehran.
في خطوة وصفت بالمهمة قامت وزارة الدفاع العراقية.
The Iraqi Defense Ministry has formed new National Guard units to protect Iraqi oil installations from sabotage operations. This important step means that the job of protecting the oil installations will be taken away from private companies and contractors. Foreign companies and private contractors are no longer in charge of protecting the oil installations in Kirkuk. The Iraqi army has taken over that responsibility. Observers consider this a step in the right direction that will eventually decrease the number of sabotage operations targeting the heart of the Iraqi economy. This will also enable the government to directly enforce its control over vital Iraqi economic interests.
المنشآت النفطية في السابق كانت ضمن مسؤولية المتعهدين المدنيين.
Previously, protection of the oil installations were the responsibility of civilian
وزارة الدفاع العراقية
working with the northern and southern oil companies. The Iraqi Defense Ministry formed army and National Guard units to protect the oil fields of Khubz and Al-Fatha.
القطاع النفطي ابتداء من حقول خباز امتدادا إلى مناطق الفتحة.
حقول خباز والتي تحوي أكثر من 30 بئرا نفطيا إنتاجيا.
Khabbaz, which has more than 30 oil wells, is the largest oil production field in Iraq. The field spreads over more than 100 square kilometers in southwest Kirkuk. The army was forced to seek help from local tribes by recruiting young men in the villages who have been suffering from unemployment to protect the oil fields.
في صفوف الأفواج المسلحة التي تكفلت مسؤولية الحماية.
أو ما شكلت سرية تشكل على هيئة مجاميع عشائرية.
The units include fighters that come from 250 families. This, of course, will increase the income level of these families.
هذا يرفع من شأن الدخل الأسري للعائلة.
خطة أمنية محكمة حيث لم تشهد هذه المنطقة منذ تولي.
The new security strategy seems to be effective because since these forces took charge of protecting this area, no sabotage operations has taken place. If this model is used in all oil installations and other vital economic sites, then the Iraqi economy, which has been threatening to collapse, might be saved. Recruiting local tribal men to the Iraqi army and giving them the responsibility of defending oil fields is a qualitative shift in the strategy used to secure the largest oil fields in the north of Iraq. From Dibis area, Samin Fakhri, Al-Alam, Kirkuk.
The views expressed on Mosaic are not those of Link TV or its sponsors, but of the broadcasters themselves. Mosaic is made possible by a grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, which promotes journalism excellence worldwide and invests in the vitality of 26 U.S. communities, and the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. Additional support is provided by the Firedoll Foundation and Henry and Virgilia Dakin.